My son banned me from his wedding, but had the nerve to send me a $90,000 bill to pay for it. Venue catering, even a honeymoon in the Maldives, all on my tab. At the bottom, in his clean, calculated handwriting, he wrote, "Be grateful. I'm letting you help." For a moment, it hit me like a punch to the chest. The kind that knocks the wind out of you before your brain can catch up. Then the pain settled into something colder, sharper. I set the papers down. They landed with a flat, heavy sound that told the truth about their weight. My eyes drifted past them, through the archway to the living room, where my father's old pocket watch sat on the mantel. Brass caught the light. Its steady tick had been the heartbeat of my childhood. I carried that sound into fatherhood, into nights rocking Evan to sleep, into mornings when Laura was too sick to get out of bed. Now that same boy had erased me from the biggest day of his life and handed me the bill like I was a faceless sponsor. Grateful, he'd written. Grateful was selling my pickup to help pay for Laura's heart surgery. Grateful was missing mortgage payments to keep Evan in his last semester at Duke. Grateful was covering moving costs when Melissa decided their apartment needed a skyline view. This was something else. I stood, knees aching the way they do when weather turns, and put the kettle on. Tea doesn't cure betrayal. It gives you 3 minutes to choose who you'll be when the water boils. By the click, I'd decided. I'm Thomas Bennett's to most. I live in a stubborn brick townhouse in Plaza Midwood, with a porch that thinks it's a living room. 34 years as a structural engineer, which means I believe in weight, balance, and rules that keep roofs where roofs belong. Laura, my wife, died 3 years ago. Congenital heart defect that outlasted 2 surgeries and every hope I could memorize. Evan is 28, shiny and impatient. His fiancée is Melissa, ambitious, tasteful, and raised by the kind of mother who treats a mood board like a military plan. They were getting married at Harborview Estate up on Lake Norman, or so they thought. 6 months back, when I was still allowed in rooms where centerpieces were discussed, I signed the booking form at Harborview to hold the date. The events manager slid the paper toward me with a practiced smile. "We can always swap the names later," she said. And I'd been the helpful one always, the helpful one who put down the deposit on my card because Melissa's mother, Drea Pike, insisted summer Saturdays vanish faster than good manners. I called Cynthia Morales. Cynthia and I started at the same firm in 1990, me with rolled-up plans and terrible coffee, her with a new bar card and a spine the inspector feared by week 2. She'd argued my permit appeals and saved me from 2 contractors I should never have trusted. When she left to build Morales and West with her name on the glass, we stayed friends. "Read me the invoice," she said when I sent the scan. "Then tell me everything with your name on it." "Harborview deposit," I said. "Contracts in my name. Wedding insurance policy to Evan asked me to buy a just-in-case plan back when I was still a person and not a checkbook." Cynthia sighed through her nose. "The way smart women let steam out of a room without fogging the glass." "All right. First, you're not paying that bill. Second, you're not a hostage just because your signature is on Harborview. As contracting party, you can withdraw and freeze site access until a new contract holder is established. Third, cancel any insurance where you're the policyholder. Fourth, if any travel agency tried to run honeymoon charges through your card, we go straight to your card issuer in dispute under the Fair Credit Billing Act. Fifth, we do this tidy. No theatrics. Paper and patience. "Is this revenge?" I asked. I hated how small I sounded. "This is housekeeping," she said. "They pulled your chair and stuck your name on the ledger. You're returning the ledger to the person who wrote it." Opened my laptop and wrote an email. I knew how to write the kind that changes the shape of a room without a raised voice. "Dear Harborview Estate, as the contracting party for booking #HV-386 Bennett Pike, this is formal notice of withdrawal. I revoke consent for my card on file to be used for any further payment. Please pause all vendor access and site permissions until a new contract holder is established. Future correspondence, Mrs. Andrea Pike, CCD. Regards, Thomas Bennett. CCD events, accounts." And because paper is where I allow myself to be, Petty Andrea and Melissa. Harborview replied within 30 minutes. 80. And grateful. Dear Mr. Bennett, we confirm your withdrawal. Booking paused, pending a new contract holder. No vendors will be admitted until insurance, balances, and permits are presented by the new party. Thank you for clarifying the insurance position. Andrea called 6 minutes later. Thomas, she said, vowels starched and crisp. We are extremely distressed. I can imagine, I said. Good news is, it's simple. Sign your own contract. Pay your own bill. Once insurance and balances are in place, Harborview will roll out the lawn. Do you understand what this means? She asked, as if I'd kicked over her favorite topiary. It means I won't fund an event I'm banned from, I said. It also means the venue keeps its license. Those are the meanings I'm responsible for. You're being difficult, she hissed. I'm being responsible? I said. You have 9 weeks. She hung up with a sound like an old derindinant, theatrical, ultimately unimportant. Within the hour, email shook loose like apples after a wind. Signature Catering wanted confirmation of kitchen access hours for off-site prep. Right line. AV requested the power plan 3-phase distribution, generator spec, cable runs. The florist needed cooler space for 400 stems. String quartet asked sweetly if vendor meals were accounted for. A content creator sent a 4-page PDF titled Deliverables and Rights. I forwarded everything to Andrea. My son sent 2 emojis. A clock and a bomb. Sent him a teacup. Horizon Travel Boutique had tokenized my card after a, quote, call with Melissa months before. For convenience, the agent said then. Cynthia fired a tidy letter to Horizon and my bank disputes team. Any authorization on my card for? The Bennett Pike itinerary was revoked. Any tokenized card data purged. Any charge to be reversed under FCBA? The travel agent called me with an apology that got stuck in her teeth. Of course, Mr. Bennett, we'll move the reservation to a different payer. With Harborview paused, Andrea pivoted. We'll do it on the family property, she announced in a group text I hadn't asked to be on. Pike Meadow. Sailcloth. Tent. Very elevated. Generator. A few restrooms. Acoustic after 10. Authentic. Honestly better than Harborview. Glenberg. County has noise ordinances and special event permits, I wrote. Fire marshal occupancy limits aren't decorative. Thomas, she replied. You're so procedural. We've hired a brilliant team who does Glastonbury. Let the experts handle it. I did not call the county. Did not email. The fire marshal. I did not walk the meadow with a measuring wheel like an old ghost. I wrote one more note only to Carolina Tents when Andrea tried to use my name to confirm final measurements. Sir, man called Gus said on the phone. Voice warm with sawdust and sense. We've got Mrs. Pike here saying she's you. Didn't sound right. Also, she wants 300 under sailcloth on a slope. That's extra ballast and a second guy line set. If they don't pay for that, the wind will make choices. She is not me, I said. Please put the ballast requirement in writing. We did, he said. They told us to make it pretty. Make it safe, I said. Pretty can attend if it pays. 2 weeks before the day, a cream card. Arrived, embossed with thistles. Inside, Evan, my son, had written, Dad, it's our day. You've made it difficult. We'll do it without you. Please stop whatever you think you're doing. You're embarrassing me. I lit a supermarket candle because mischief needs boundaries, and wrote back in the tidy hand that used to earn me gold stars. Dear Evan, I love you. I love you enough not to be your wallet when you've barred me from the door. I am not embarrassing you. I am refusing to be embarrassed. You are an adult. Plan accordingly. Love, Dad. The morning arrived, rude with rain. Then sun muscled through for an apology. Then rain returned as if North Carolina had decided to be itself. I had a plan. Drive to Southport, eat a sandwich on the boardwalk, and let other people learn about ballast the way men like me learn. Loudly and late, at 3:42 p.m., my phone lit up. Brightline, A.V. Mr. Bennett? A man shouted over line noise. Sorry, probably not the person. We're having issues. The generator's single phase and undersize. no distro boxes. The sound engineer's inventing new expletives. Mrs. Pike says, "You're across the detail. Is there a second generator coming?" "You'll need to ask the contracting party," I said. "Good luck." At 7, truth arrived in texts from people who still found me sensible enough to tell. 4 portable restrooms for nearly 300 guests, queues like pennants. The sailcloth skylines weren't staked deep enough into Pike Meadows' forgiving soil. Wind made choices. The generator tripped 3 times because romance had never met load balancing. The acoustic after 10 was told to go acoustic at 9 because neighbors consulted by no one called from 2 subdivisions over. The sheriff arrived with a county inspector whose vest meant the word no in 3 languages. The bar went casually when the cellular repeater detail, no one had a sign, went dark. The caterer ran out of clean pans because water had been treated like a concept rather than a resource. The saxophonist climbed onto a table. Someone filmed it. Of course they did. At 10:23, Evan called. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Dad," he said, breath tight. "I know you're doing something with Andrea, but this is nuts." "The generator? It's not a conspiracy," I said. "It's electricity, Dad," he said, the word falling like a coin. "Please, help." Here it was, the old instinct, honed by 1,000 small fatherhoods. To fix what boys break with tone, lists, and calls to men who carry the right wrenches. I stared at the dark line of the intracoastal and chose a new instinct. "I can't conjure power," I said. "I can tell you what you didn't pay for, but tonight you'll only hear rain." Silence. Then the sound I hadn't heard since he was small listening. "I banned you," he said. "And then I sent you a bill." "Yes," I said. "You froze Harborview. I refused to be used. You made us do it without you. You insisted." "You wanted to," I said. "I didn't call the county. I didn't underorder restrooms. I didn't try to run your honeymoon through my card. I stepped out of a room where I wasn't welcome and took my name with me. The rest is gravity." He exhaled into the phone. Behind him, a chorus of Sweet Caroline died like a generator on its last apology. "I'll come tomorrow," he said. Voice small. "If you'll let me." "Noon," I said. "I'll make meatloaf. Tell me the parts that were good. Leave out Andrea." He laughed. "Brief. Real." There was a saxophonist on a table. "I will practice looking delighted." I said, "Drive safe." He arrived at 11:58 in yesterday's suit and a face that had met consequence. I handed him coffee and a plate and let him speak. The vows were good, the speeches too long. The best man confused edgy with unkind and will. Regret it when a certain video makes its gentle rounds? The first dance was candlelit because the inspector kindly pretended to look away for 4 minutes while his partner fixed a loose exit sign. Melissa's dress had doubled in weight with water. Restrooms did their best. The generator gave up. The bar did their bit. The sheriff tilted his hat a degree in the universal language of enough now, and people went home before midnight. The way decent people do when told by a man who wears his patience like a badge. "Did you make any of it happen?" he asked, wanting me to be the villain so he could hate cleanly. "I made one thing happen," I said. "I stopped paying." He nodded. "We had to change the honeymoon. No overwater bungalow." Melissa cried. Then she put on lip gloss, called me an idiot, and said we'd swim anyway. "Good," I said. "Water's the same under all kinds of wood." Right? He smiled despite himself. "The kind that belonged to an 8-year-old boy with a missing tooth and a trout bigger than his arms." Morning did what mornings do after a stormy night. It arrived anyway. The fridge hummed. The pocket watch ticked. And my inbox filled up like a sink someone had left running. Asterisk, I made coffee and read them in order, like a man checking girders before. He trusts the roof. Brightline of V's email was polite and exhausted. Due to underspecified power and the absence of a second generator or distribution boxes, technicians had been required to triage the load. Overtime applied. Payment was due upon receipt from the contracting party. I forwarded it to Andrea with 3 words, "Not my contract. Carolina Tents had sent their own report. Gus wrote the way sensible men talk, plain and with numbers. The slope required additional ballast and a second tier of guy lines. This had been specified, ignored, and then implemented in the field to prevent catastrophic sail movement. A supplemental invoice was attached. I almost replied thank you for keeping a lot of strangers alive, but contented myself with forwarding it to Andrea and adding Cynthia and CC, the social content. Email belonged to the content creatoring light. Square format confidence. A PDF attached with deliverables and usage rights, highlighted in the way people use yellow when they're certain. Someone else's attention span is a problem. She'd filmed hero moments at the Meadow couple shots, sparklers, saxophonist on a table, a candlelit dance. She wanted payment and a signature granting her the right to monetize across platforms. I wrote back, I am not a party to your agreement. I direct this to your client. Then, because mischief is best deployed in legalese, I added, do not use my name in any credits tags or invoices going forward. Last came the county's advisory, a courtesy copy, a friend at the fire marshal's office. Sent me because we'd argued politely over egress widths for 20 years. The Meadow had hosted a large unpermitted assembly. Temporary event application had not been filed, and amplified music had exceeded the code. It was a warning and a help sheet in one. Fines noted for future violations, a list of conditions. For private property events, a phone number that belonged to a woman who could make 1,000 people. Appear compliant with only a laminated badge and a pen. I left that one alone. Andrea would get her copy. Gravity doesn't need me to file it. By 10, Cynthia rang. How are your blood pressure and your sense of humor? Holding, I said. We've got invoices trying to find a wallet in a county with a pen. Good bright lines, your sons-in-law problem? Carolina tenses too. I'll draft a general notice of non-liability and send it to every vendor who tries to route through you. Meanwhile, Horizon Travel attempted to push a seat hold fee through your card at 7:58 this morning. Of course they did. I said, I've already lodged a dispute under the Fair Credit Billing Act, she said. You'll get a letter from the bank. Also, they've confirmed after a firm asked that your tokenized card info is scrubbed. I owe you a cake. I said, you owe me better coffee than you used to brew in '97, she said. And one more thing, expect an email from a lawyer with too many ampersands in his firm name? He arrived before lunch. Subject, pre-suit demand. In damages, Knox and Tate, on behalf of Mrs. Andrea Pike. They alleged I had caused measurable financial and emotional loss by withdrawing, contractual support, and interfering with the vendors. They demanded payment of $28,450 loose, generator, overtime, loss of delight, yes, really, a written apology, and an undertaking not to undermine future family events. Cynthia read it, chuckled, and built a reply with edges. Liability, denied, causation, absent. My withdrawal from Harborview was lawful as contracting party. I had no contractual privity with any Meadow vendor. Any further misuse of my name, or attempts to bill me, might be routed to the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and the State Bar. Given counsel's adventurous approach to tort law, she CC'd Knox Andrea, and because Sunlight disinfects Harborview's events manager. After she hit send, she called me back. That should sit them down, she said, briefly. I spent the afternoon doing the only thing that keeps me from turning into the sort of man who writes comments online. I cleaned the garage. I threw out a box labeled Cord's Mystery that had survived for moves. I found Laura's old picnic blanket and sat on the concrete with the smell of dust and oil in my nose until the ache eased enough to let me stand. At 6, the doorbell chimed. Evan, hair damp, shoulders hunched the way men carry shame when they haven't decided how to set it down. Come in, I said. Meatloaf's almost done. He didn't make me work for it, not that day. I'm sorry, he said, standing in the entryway, hand on the old hall table like he was waiting for a gavel. For the bill? For the line I wrote? For telling you not to come? For letting Andrea run over you with a lawn plan? I let the silence be large enough to fit the words inside. All right, I said. Sit, eat, tell me the good parts. We'll get to the rest. He told me about vows that had remembered to say please, about Melissa laughing at the exact wrong moment, and making everything right. About the way candlelight found faces that electricity would have flattened. About the sheriff who had the kindness to pretend he couldn't hear Neil Diamond for 4 minutes. He ate like a man who had built nothing all day and needed to. Then we did the rest. Asterisk, asterisk, why the note? I asked when the plates were empty and the coffee was hot. Be grateful I'm letting you help. Where'd that boy come from? He rubbed his eyes like he was remembering how to be 8. We were short, he said finally. We wanted big, and we had. Not big. Melissa wanted. It perfect. Andrea wanted. It massive. I wanted. To look like a man who could afford things. You see guys on Instagram proposing with drones and sunsets, and suddenly a suit you already own feels like failure? That is not a spreadsheet. I said, it's a hallucination. He smiled despite himself. I know, I didn't then. We started adding just one more thing like we were building a bridge with balloons. Every time I thought about calling you, I heard Andrea in my head telling me to grow up. Then I heard myself telling you to disappear. I wrote the note because I was embarrassed and wanted to sound like I wasn't. It worked, I said. You sounded like a man who'd forgotten who bought him his first toolkit. He winced and nodded. I told Melissa we're going to do a dinner, small, properly paid for with you. Good, I said. Start there. We didn't fix the world that night. We cleaned a corner. 2 days later, Horizon Travel's letter arrived. We acknowledge receipt of your dispute, said in the cheerful tone banks use when they've learned no one will throw a chair. We have removed all authorizations and will not process any charges to your account for the Bennett Pike itinerary. Put it in the folder labeled paper that behaves itself. Knox and Tate replied to Cynthia with a note that tried to be both gracious and threatening. Our client maintains her position, they wrote, but in the interests of family harmony will not pursue this further at present. Cynthia sent me a screenshot of the last clause with 3 laughing emojis, then immediately apologized for the emojis. I'm regressing, she said. It's contagious. On Friday, Melissa knocked. She wore leggings, a hoodie that admitted. It had been worn, and a face that had been tired in expensive places and learned nothing from it. She sat at my table and folded her hands like she was about to be given blood work results. I was unkind, she said. I made it easy for my mom to be worse. We built a stage. Then we tried to buy a plot twist. Can you help me? Not with Andrea. With money. With saying no. Yes, I said. Bring a pencil. We opened her laptop. Its budget, rent, groceries, utilities, health insurance, car debt, a line for things we actually use. We added a line called the opposite of weddings, appointments for tires. Pee-wee soccer fees we didn't have yet, bad weeks that require takeout, and the sort of wine that doesn't pretend. We set up separate savings, boring emergencies, boring dental, boring tires. She wrote boring and then underlined it twice. We both laughed because nothing is funnier than stability when you've been living on confetti. Also, I said, Andrea cannot open your mail. She doesn't, Melissa said, then paused. She sorts it. She cannot sort it, I said. She can come over and hold the baby when you have one someday, if she learns to do it without touching the checkbook. Till then, she can host her own parties. Melissa nodded as if approval had been withheld. Her whole life, and she had just discovered she could live without it, the post-wedding dinner. Andrea wanted appeared on a shared calendar like a summons. Private room at a bank-approved steakhouse. The kind with the wall of wine bottles like hostage negotiators. Dress code. Elevated cocktail. Place cards on the head, table read. Melissa, Evan, Andrea, Frank, Andrea's husband. Matron of honor, best man, at a smaller table. Near the door, Thomas. Evan stood at the entrance and read the cards like a man who had finally learned to. Distinguish between decorative and load-bearing. No, he said, and moved my card to the head table. He swapped out the best man's card and put it at the door, then he sat down and waited. Andrea arrived in the sort of silk that asks you to applaud. She saw the change and tried to move the cards back with fingertips. Evan placed his hand on the table so gently and so firmly that it made a better point than most speeches. Mom, he said, voice soft, either my father sits with me, or we take him to a diner and order pancakes and laugh about how small, This room is compared to the entire world. Her mouth opened, then closed. We watched a season of her life end and another one consider auditioning. Fine, she said, like a man at a four-way stop in the rain. If you insist, I do, he said. Dinner was fine. Steakhouse fine, which is its own religion. Andrea tried to tell a story about the saxophonist fiasco and how some people had overreacted. Evan told a story about the vows instead. Melissa told one about the bar staff doing their best with cash when the cell repeater died. I told one about Laura laughing at our wedding when the DJ played the wrong first dance song and we decided to keep it and make it ours. Some stories win because they're better. Some win because they're true to after, in the parking lot. Under a streetlight doing honest work, Evan hugged me like a man who had finally decided whose gravity to respect. I found something, he said. From his pocket, he pulled a thin envelope. Inside was a check from Harborview the deposit, less a small administrative fee. Cynthia had been whispering in the right ears. Do what you want, he said. We sent it to the hospice where Laura had died laughing at a volunteer's terrible joke. The receptionist cried when she read the note. In memory of Laura Bennett, it said, from a wedding that taught us what matters. Evan and I went to the winter gala because showing up for nurses is how you say thank you to the universe without words. We didn't post about it. Sometimes you keep things small so they can fit where they belong. The last flare-up came in January, as these things do when people mistake the calendar for absolution. Andrea forwarded me a final consolidated invoice, minus loss of delight. Now attempting to tack on the farmer's verge repair and a cleaning fee for the rented chairs. Knox and Tate had trimmed their adjectives. Cynthia sent a last reply, no. She added 3 footnotes in the language magistrates like. There were no more letters. Spring cleaned the city, and my head with it. Evan and Melissa invited a dozen people to a small dinner at a barbecue joint where sweet tea comes. In cups that double as souvenirs, we ate ribs we were not graceful about, and a slaw that had no business being that good. There were toasts short. Melissa thanked the staff by name. Evan read from a note card. My father taught me how to say no without making the room smaller. He said, turns out that's a skill that buys better things than flowers. I cried into a napkin because naps are expensive and crying is free. On a Tuesday in May, Melissa came over with a stack of forms. Health insurance. A 401k rollover. An envelope from the DMV that had no right to be that menacing. We filled them. Out, we drank coffee badly. Robin threw itself at my window repeatedly because it had fallen in love with its own reflection. We laughed at that too, because sometimes the world writes its own metaphors and asks you only to accept the gift. Later, at the door, Melissa paused. I asked my mom to stop. Sorting, she said, our mail, our life. She sent a long text about respect, sent back a thumbs up and then muted the thread. Evan thinks I'm a monster. I think I'm a person. You're a person, I said. Monsters rarely bring a highlighter and ask about the deductible. She grinned, surprised she had one left. Summer took its time and then arrived all at once like a cousin you forgot you'd invited. Sundays became a small religion. Evan and Melissa came for dinner. We argued about whether carrots should be glazed. No, and whether Charlotte's foxes are multiplying, yes. Evan found the vacuum without asking where it lived. Melissa rinsed plates before washing them because no one did that in Andrea's house, and she liked the sound it made when she chose different. On the last Sunday in August, as we stood in the kitchen with dishes stacked like jazz, Evan looked at the pocket watch on the mantel and said, she would have liked this. She would have demanded the recipe for the slaw, I said. And then she would have ignored it and made it better. He leaned against the counter and looked like his father and like himself. Dad, he said, I know it wasn't a nightmare to you, the wedding. I mean not. In the way I said in my head when the generator went, it was a lesson. Lessons are boring, I said. That's what makes them useful. He laughed and rubbed his face. Do you ever wish you'd paid it, the 90 grand? That we'd just had the perfect day so I wouldn't have had to learn anything? No, I said. Perfect days are overrated. They teach you very little. This one taught you where to put your name and where to keep your wallet. I'll take that over sparklers. He nodded slowly, as if someone had just handed him a level and he'd discovered. The bubble cared about the truth. We walked outside to the porch that thinks it's a living room. The neighborhood did what neighborhoods. Dogs arguing with squirrels, a kid wobbling on a scooter, couple pretending they didn't hear their own recycling bin fall over. Evan sat on the steps, and, for the first time since he was 8 and swollen with a victory trout, he rested his head against my shoulder. "Is this what it's like," he said, "to be a person who doesn't owe anyone a performance?" I said, "Mostly it's meatloaf and forms, and showing up and not writing things on invoices you wouldn't say to someone's face." He laughed, the night taking the sound and making it part of itself. "You want a tidy ending? We don't have those. We have tea and paperwork and men in vests who say enough now at the right time. We have sons who learn to put a father's name where it belongs, on a chair at the head table, on a check made out to a hospice, on a mailbox that receives only his own bills. And if you want a last sentence that makes a point, have this. The envelope that arrived on that October morning was heavy enough to bruise. The life that followed it is not. It has weight, but it sits where it should. The roof stands, the lights stay on. The music fades when the neighborhood needs sleep. Clean up, we wash plates, we keep the pocket watch wound. We do not send anyone a bill for the privilege of being invited.